Good Thursday afternoon to you. 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Plenty of Browns to talk about. A little later in the show, Casey Kinnamon from Dawg Daily will be along. We'll talk plenty of Browns, recapping the draft. We begin by talking Browns, and let's welcome in Quincy Carrier. So Quincy, talked to you last week. It was round one. And then on Friday, the Browns trade completely out of the second round. Were you surprised how far back that they traded?
Yeah. I think this was a situation where they just saw all of the wide receivers go in front of them, and maybe that's the position that they were keying in on, or they felt like they had some great grades on, and they just had to move back. They felt like, okay, we're going to go in a different direction here. We like the third crop of wide receivers quite a bit. We feel like we can move back, pick up some extra value. And I think in the long term, they're thinking, hey, we got to add young talent here. And right now, you don't have a lot of shots at the board because you traded away a lot of draft picks to acquire Deshaun Watson. So now, you're in a situation where, hey, you want to add some more picks. You feel like you can still add quality players. Maybe they felt like the difference between a Sky Moore and a David Bell just wasn't that big, or even that different, or even different at all, to justify picking him there instead of taking that trade offer. So I think they made a long-term move there. It's not a surprise. Andrew Berry, he makes a lot of moves that you think about it in the short term, and you're like, why did they do that? Like when they drafted Nick Harris, right? And then 2 years later, you get it. So some of these moves, the Jerome Ford pick, you're like, why did they do that? They already got like 8 running backs. But then probably in a couple years, or maybe in a year, we're going to be like, oh, okay, that's why they did that.
All right. As late as they picked, two things. What do you think of the Browns draft as they amassed, the class of it? And what message do you take away from that?
I think, one, they valued the defensive line talent at a lower grade. So like once they hit that fourth round, I think they got like they got the third round pick, Alex Wright, and then Perrion Winfrey right after that. Then they got Isaiah Thomas from Oklahoma too. So like they just went on a run there of defensive line talent. So it tells me that unless they feel like a defensive lineman or edge rusher is unusually talented, that's normally where they're going to value them. Two, the wide receiver they got, David Bell, is an interesting case here, right? Because all signs will point to you that the Browns would not be a team that would be interested in David Bell just because he tested so poorly. And the Browns get this reputation around the league because they have a lot of Harvard grads in the front office, because they do rely on a lot of analytics, that they're an analytic-heavy team, or they're going to rely on these Spark scores and these RAS scores and these other indexes and everything else like that in order to make their selection. Sometimes they abandon that if they feel like the player is good enough or the tape's good enough that they could justify it. David Bell is a great example in that, where they felt like, hey, the tape's good enough to take a chance on him. I feel like the testing stuff doesn't matter as much, and I feel like he could be a good wide receiver for this team. So, I think we're learning that these guardrails that they seem to follow a majority of the time are not hard, fasted rules. They can break them if they want to, and they'll break them when they feel like the player is extraordinary enough, or element of their evaluation is extraordinary enough to forego it. Perrion Winfrey is another guy who's not going to pop off on any testing because he didn't do that much testing during this period. But if you watch him at the Senior Bowl, you watched him in certain situations at Oklahoma, you'll see, okay, yeah, this dude pops off the tape.
Does it tell you, when I look at that, the message I kind of got was, they're drafting like they think they're a contender. It's not like they thought, we gotta address this area. I mean, heck, they took a cornerback in the third round, and their cornerback room is as deep probably as there is. To me, that says we think we're a contender. We're kind of drafting to make sure we fill in when guys are going to be moving on in a year or two.
Yeah, they're definitely in reload, not rebuild, right? I think we've been talking about this forever in Cleveland. Oh, when are we going to reload instead of rebuild? Well, this is what reloading looks like, right? Not reaching for players because of need, not feeling like you got to draft a guy because of need, but just getting the best player that you feel like you could get at the spot that you're at. And that's what the Browns did all draft. They felt like they could get good players here. They felt like they could get good players there. They felt like they could get more picks for good players. And I think that's indicative of where they think they could be. And let's be honest here. Once they traded for Deshaun Watson and Amari Cooper this offseason, we knew that they felt like they better be able to win now. You don't make those moves unless you feel like you can win now or you have enough to. It was clearly their pitch to Deshaun Watson. Hey, you can win a Super Bowl with this team if everything goes right, the way it's built already before we even got into the draft and free agency. So, that's definitely a factor there. They're definitely ready to win now, and this is a team with Andrew Berry again. You look at stuff like the Nick Harris stuff, the James Hudson thing that's going to probably transpire next year when it comes to whatever they're going to do with Jack Conklin. And you're seeing a front office that, look, they inherited a pretty fortunate situation here with the roster. Not like the roster was a decimated, terrible roster when they got it. They inherited a good situation, but now they're taking that situation and being able to reload it, right? We thought this window was done last year when this roster got set up by John Dorsey in 2019. Andrew Berry has been able to slowly reload it, change out some pieces. Okay, no Jarvis Landry anymore, no Odell Beckham. I'll go get Amari Cooper. Okay, J.C. Tretter's a little expensive. Okay, I'll swap him out with this guy I drafted. Like the ability to reload is what makes Baltimore, Pittsburgh, and Cincinnati teams that have had long-term success in this division, and why the Browns have not. Because the Browns have had a couple of good teams, but they've never been able to reload those good teams, and they've always faltered after that. This is a team and a franchise that at least appears to be reloading and has showed some signs of that reloading working. So, this is different. The Browns are functional, ladies and gentlemen. This is what a functional franchise does. You have very competent people here at the top when it comes to DePodesta and Andrew Berry, for sure.
Yeah, and it's interesting and fun to watch. All right, ranking the top 10 instant impact rookies for 2022. This is according to Chris Trapasso, CBSSports.com. Number 1 is Sky Moore. Honorable mention, David Bell. They go on to say, had Bell run a few tenths of a second faster at his combine or pro day, he'd have been a first-round receiver. You kind of, and I know his testing scores weren't great, but Quincy, this is a guy that catches the football and gets separation. Does he have the quote-unquote football speed?
When you watch him on tape, he doesn't seem slow, right? I would say this, and when I watch Anthony Schwartz, I am amazed he runs a 4.24, right? Like when you see him on tape, you're like, man, he does not look like he runs a 4.24 at all. He looks like he runs like a 4.4, 4.5. Same thing with Cooper Kupp, right? You'd be shocked to hear Cooper Kupp runs like a 4.64. DeAndre Hopkins runs like a 4.6. Jarvis ran like almost a 4.8, which is almost disqualifying in his combine. Like a lot of these guys that could get open in the NFL, it's not because they're fast. I say this all the time. Getting open, especially in the NFL, is a talent in its own. It is not relying on how fast you are. It is not relying on how quick you are. It is just a skill that you either have or you don't, right? What David Bell reminds me of is what everybody kind of hoped Rashard Higgins would be, because he does have that Rashard Higgins thing in him where his tape is pretty good in college and he can get open, but you just don't see any of the speed. I think David Bell is a better athlete than Rashard Higgins ever was, and he's able to get open, and we'll find out in camp, right? Dudes like that can either get open or they can't get open. It might take him a couple of years because he's smaller, and he doesn't have the eye-popping tangibles or anything like that. So it might take him a couple of years to get settled in the NFL. I don't know if he's a right-away guy, but we'll know if he has potential when we see him out there and against the second and third team. If he's able to get open against those guys, eventually he'll probably be able to get open against NFL guys, because the tape is the tape on David Bell. And you don't play that well in college against top-tier competition, especially against Ohio State in that Purdue game that they won, and not have the ability to get open in the NFL. This is my opinion on it. I think we make too much of 40 times in some of this testing, especially when it comes to wide receiver, because I think we think that it means the most for that position, when if you look at the history of the position, how many of those 4.2 guys are elite wide receivers in the NFL? Like there is Tyreek Hill and who else, right? Like the burning guys, the guys that, the John Rosses, the Dree Archers, the Anthony Schwartz, the ones that we say, oh man, no way anybody can cover them. They're 4-2 fast. They always get covered, right? Because there's ways to cover that in the NFL. But the dudes like Keenan Allen, who aren't fast at all, DeAndre Hopkins, those dudes who are slow, but find a way to get open. Those dudes be open fast. Anquan Bolden. It's not rare that a slower wide receiver gets open. And if I could list you examples after examples in the NFL. It's nice to have that 4.3 speed. I'm not saying it's unnecessary, right? Like, it's nice. Randy Moss is really good. But, it's not necessarily necessary, right? We could point to Jerry Rice. Terrell Owens was pretty fast, actually, so I'll put him in the fast category. But, Jerry Rice was slow compared to other wide receivers. Like, you can name tons of them that are relatively slow. Now, I'm saying slow, but if they ran a 4.6 in front of you, you'd be like, that's the fastest man I have ever seen in my life. But relative to other NFL players, it is technically slow, but it's fine.
Quincy Carrier and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we'll head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Take a look at some free agents that are still out there and where their destinations may be. Sports4CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns with Quincy Carrier. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one about the draft grade that the Browns got this year.
Hey, this is Buddy, stuck in Baltimore. A lot of the draft is dictated by other off-season moves through free agency or trades. So I think what they really should call it is, or when they give a grade, it should be just called the off-season grade. Because when the Browns were getting a C on a couple of them, a B minus that I saw, and they also picked up Amari Cooper, so we'll call that their second round pick, and a guy by the name of Deshaun Watson, we'll call that their first round pick. Will that change your grade at all about the draft? And I think when you look at it that way, and the total acquisitions in general, added up, I don't think anybody or very many teams did better than Cleveland, and they certainly would not be a B minus or lower, that's for sure. All right, thank you.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Quincy, it's a valid point. Browns fans are too locked into, draft grade because forever it's been the Super Bowl. That's going to change. But the point is, you get Deshaun Watson, you got an elite quarterback, you got Amari Cooper, and you got an elite wide receiver. That was 1 and 1A on what the Browns needed to improve to get that passing game up to par.
Yeah, and honestly, I mean, I'm surprised Browns fans ain't tired of having, winning the draft. Like, how many times have we won the draft? It like won 5 games. You know what I mean? So, yeah, we're not winning the draft. People aren't giving us high draft grades. Draft grades are literally like the least important thing in the world, because like, what if you get an F on draft day? Does it matter? I mean, there were people who gave Aaron Donald selection in 2014 an F with the 14th there. But Amari Cooper, the Browns have done a good job reloading in this offseason. People know that the Browns are going to be a contending team here. I don't think we need to win every single offseason move along the way. And honestly, we've won enough offseasons over the last few years to where I just want to win the games, right? Like, I want to see this turn into wins on the field, So, yeah, sure. It would be nice to get all that publicity and pump. But right now, at this point, I just want to see them win the games, because we've been here before multiple times. For the last 4 years, we've been here. It's time to actually put this in practice and do what Cincinnati did, but better.
I'm with you. All right, 10 free agent signings that make sense after the 2022 draft. This is from Pro Football Focus. When we look at it, Jadeveon, Clowney to the Browns. So we'll get that one in a minute. They have Jarvis, Landry landing with the Saints, and then former Browns center J.C. Treader to the Dolphins. Now, there's a lot of people that seem to think it's a matter of if instead of, or when really, instead of if with Clowney, although there are reports nationally that he might be considering weather and all that. What do you think? What are your thoughts on Clowney coming back to the Browns?
Yeah, I think that's pretty much going to happen. It makes no sense for Clowney to go anywhere else, right? Where's Clowney's best opportunity to be the most successful in his football career? It's here. Where's he going to have the most help? It's here. Who's likely going to be comfortable enough with his medicals and his age to give him the most money? It's probably here. Like, once all 3 of those things line up, let's be real here. This is Jadeveon Clowney we're talking about. Jadeveon is a really, really hard worker. I don't want to make it seem like he's not a really hard worker, but he also is a veteran, and he probably ain't trying to sign until after some calendar events pass for the mandatory schedule here, so he can get back to work the way he wants to. So I think that's done. We're just waiting on that to happen. I wouldn't freak out too much about it if I were a Browns fan, because it just, at the end of the day, it just makes sense for all parties involved, especially now that the Browns have switched up certain things on the offense that make them more of a contender. And that was mainly the defense's dissatisfaction with this team, was the lack of offense that was created last year. I think that Clowney makes a ton of sense here. That's probably the most likely guy to come back out of all of them. So, yeah, I think we're just waiting on some things to clear out. Like, remember, Austin Hooper's money doesn't get off the books until June 1st. So that might be when they're just going to give that money to Clowney. You know what I mean? Like, they're just waiting for some logistical things to probably happen to secure that one. So, I would wait till June for that. But we haven't really heard Clowney linked to any other team, right? You know what I mean? So I think he's probably going to be here.
I'm with you. All right, here's Ian Rappaport on the Pat McAfee Show on the signing of Jarvis Landry and when he thinks that might happen.
Odell is still out there.
Yeah.
Jarvis is still out there. I think Jarvis will probably sign sooner rather than later. But Odell, I think you'd like a little more time to make sure he's healing properly. Sounds like that's going really, really well, though.
Oh, yeah?
But, I mean, all those guys still on the board. That's rare this time of year.
So, Quincy, we've heard Jarvis's name connected to the Saints, the Titans, the Ravens. It seems like that market's kind of expanding based on, the draft and what happened with the draft and some of the trades. It's seeming less and less likely, like to me at least, that he's going to come back to the Browns. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think they're really satisfied with what they have in the room here. They have David Bell. They feel, they were. I know people in Cleveland are not as excited, but they were really excited about Anthony Schwartz and being able to get him in the 3rd round. So that tells me they valued him higher than the 3rd round. If you go back and watch their reaction to it, the quote from Stefanski was, "I can't believe we got this guy in the 3rd round," which tells me they thought he was a 2nd round pick at least, right? So, they're high on Anthony Schwartz. They're high on Donovan Peoples-Jones. They feel like Jakeem Grant can offer something as a wide receiver. We know he's going to return kicks and punts, but he could be an occasional deep threat, right? They obviously feel good about Amari Cooper, and I think they feel good about their room going into this season, knowing what they've upgraded at quarterback. And they might not feel like some of those woes at the wide receiver position was all to do with the wide receivers. You know what I mean? They might have felt like they had more to do or a symptom of the quarterback room. So, yeah, I think they're happy with what they have right now. And, they would like to bring Jarvis back, but they did do like a goodbye medley and drop all these videos. Like, it doesn't seem like a team that was like interested in, hey, let's bring him back. Like, it seemed like once they let him go, like they knew that this was gone. You know what I mean? Like, it would be pretty awkward to have to run those videos back. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what you would do, but they dropped the goodbye Jarvis videos already. So I think at this point, it just doesn't seem very likely. Right when they got Watson, it seemed like that would be the most likely time. If they were going to do it, they would do it. They still ain't done it. We've heard Odell allude to some things about this, and he's been alluding to a lot on Twitter lately. I just don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, I'm with you. Quincy, Carrier, and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we'll look at the running back room, another voicemail of Truth and Reason. Straight ahead on Sports for CLE. Stay with us.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just a mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery, Partners in Education, where stars shine.
Thanks for buying a fishing license. I want you to picture all of the great things this simple purchase does. Like building public boat ramps, keeping local waters clean, and maintaining a healthy fish population.
What's Mom doing?
When you buy a fishing license, you do a lot. Every dollar protects and maintains your local waterways for future generations to enjoy. Visit takemefishing.org.
Quincy, Carrier, and I continue talking Browns. Time to head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one about Chase Winovich.
Hi, Dave. This is Dante from Cleveland, longtime listener, first-time caller. My question is on the importance or role of Chase Winovich. Now, everybody's been saying that he's going to be more of a role player this year, a rotational guy, but I've looked at some of his advanced defensive stats, and I know that doesn't mean everything, but in 2020, which was his best year, he had 5.5 sacks, which isn't great, but he had 37 QB pressures. Now, this would be 15th in the NFL this past season, and that's over guys like Chandler Jones, Von Miller, Robert Quinn. Am I saying that he's better or as good as these guys? No, not by a long shot. But I'm saying there is potential there, and maybe do the Browns see him as a day one starter that could progress into something more significant since he has Myles Garrett on the edge? Just a thought I was kicking around in case we don't sign Jadeveon Clowney. I was thinking, well, maybe Chase Winovich is a good second option. Thanks. Appreciate taking my call.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails, and don't wait, just call us and leave a voicemail. We'll use it. Quincy, your thoughts? Winovich, a guy that gets into the rotation. You think? I think they're counting on him. I don't know that they view him as a 1A to Myles Garrett, but I certainly think they drafted some young guys to play behind him too.
I would have a hard time believing that Bill Belichick would trade away a 1A edge rusher to the Cleveland Browns with Mac Wilson. Yeah, but look, when it comes to Chase, I would say his role would be very similar to what Takk McKinley's role was last year, right? Occasional pass rusher in there. He's going to get some nice rushes. If he gets 6 sacks, that's great. That's exactly what we wanted from Chase Winovich. But I would not expand those expectations any further unless we see reason to on the field. Chase is a guy that you want to use in short bursts. He's an energy rusher. That's kind of where you want to keep him at. If you put Chase Winovich on the field for, let's say, 200 snaps, you're going to get 75 snaps worth of production in the game. You know what I mean? He's going to give you 75 good snaps if you give him 75 if you give him 200. So you just have to use him. He's a role player. He could potentially be a very good role player, right? But I think ultimately he's a role player, a guy in the rotation. I don't think he's a guy you start opposite of Myles Garrett. I think we've been down that road before with Olivier Vernon, who you could argue was still better than Chase, and Emmanuel Ogbah and guys like that, where we have played around with that. Last year, we did not play around with who was opposite next to Myles, and you saw the fruits of that labor, right? So let's make sure we get real proven solutions next to Myles Garrett, because Myles is only going to be this dominant for so long. You can't waste that by having him be triple teamed on the other side.
Yeah, I'm with you. And again, there's nothing wrong with being Takk McKinley. If he's Takk McKinley, Browns are thrilled. Yeah, Takk McKinley was playing really well until he suffered the injury. What do you think of the running back? There's now 5 running backs. How'd that happen? What do you think of that? What's that say to you?
Yeah, 5 running backs. I'm not sure they're going to cut any of them, right? Like that's the thing here, right? It's not like 5 running backs, but like the 5th guy is like a guy they've cut before, like John Kelly or something like that. Like it's 5 dudes. Like Jerome Ford was really good. Like he was the best player on that Cincinnati offense on a team that was a non-Power 5 school that went to the playoff. I watched all of that Cincinnati season last year. I like Desmond Ridder as a person, but the best player on that offense was by far Jerome Ford. Like he carried them at points during that season. And then you look at the other side of that running back room. You got Demetric Felton, who, showed some flashes last year, was open. He's the guy that was open in that famous Baker Mayfield highlight where he just decided not to throw the check down when he was wide open, that everybody's passed around on Twitter a million times at this point. And then obviously you have Dearness Johnson, who literally won you 2 games last year off the strength of his running. And he's the 3rd running back. And I don't think you got to say anything about Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. I mean, one's a former NFL rushing leader, and he's the backup, and then the other one's Nick Chubb. So it's one of them good problems, but I feel bad for the 3rd-string defensive tackles on this team because, like, they going to have something to deal with on every snap. Imagine you the 4th team in a preseason game. It is out here. It's Dearness Johnson just running at you. This dude has had 200 yards in an NFL game before, and you out here trying to just make your mark against him. Like, it is a ridiculous. The Browns are deeper than Alabama. Like, how Alabama just be having 8 different running backs? And it's funny because, like, Jerome Ford left Alabama to go to Cincinnati because he was trying to avoid this situation, and he got drafted to the only team in the NFL that's like Alabama at the running back position, which is the Cleveland Browns, which is to say the backup, the starter are really good, and they're not going to leave for college anytime soon. And then the 3rd string guy could probably start for he would start for almost any team that doesn't have Nick Chubb or Derrick Henry. It's an incredible amount of depth that they have. I don't know how they're going to manage it. It is one of those good problems. If I were the Browns, I just wouldn't play him. Hope people forget about him in the preseason so you can sneak him onto your practice squad roster. But you might not be able to do that because Jerome Ford is most definitely capable of doing what Isaiah Crowell did in 2014 in the preseason, where he ran for like 300 yards in a game, and you just had to keep him at that point, and you had to just cut somebody else. So Andrew Berry's going to have his hands full about figuring out that position.
Those are good problems, though. You hear things. And do you think there's any way that the Browns trade Kareem Hunt?
I would doubt it. I don't see the benefit of it, right? Like, because the only reason you would do it would be to get back maybe some draft capital, because you're not going to get a player of value for Kareem Hunt back because he's a running back and he's older. So you would maybe do it for draft picks, but what about this Cleveland Browns team that just traded 3 first-round picks for a quarterback tells you that they're going to build for the future? You know what I mean? Like, this is a team that's trying to win right now, and Kareem Hunt is more valuable than the 4th-round pick you could get by trading Kareem Hunt. So I don't think they trade him. I just think they're going to have a very interesting training camp when it comes to this running back room.
Yeah, I'm with you.
It's going to be very competitive.
So the other thing, Bleacher Report came out with 2022 NFL rookies who were drafted by the wrong team. And I'm guessing, based on our conversation, you're going to agree with this. It's Jerome Ford, running back, drafted by the Browns.
Yeah, because Jerome Ford could start. I think he could start for some other teams, right? Like, I think he's a good enough prospect where he eventually, either he's a second running back or he's a starter. He was really good last year at Cincinnati. And, 5th round's not a low tier round for a running back. Like, so I don't know what they're going to do. I think he could be really good. If the Browns can't keep him on the roster, I think somebody else jumps at that opportunity and they might get him a rotational starter right there in Jerome Ford. Yeah, I don't think it means that the Browns made a bad pick. It's just like, at some point, you got to wonder how you going to keep all these dudes on the team. And it's like, man, it looked like Demetric Felton might have to go, and they love Demetric Felton. So I don't know. I have no idea.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. And again, when you find guys that can play and they're available and you think it's a value, you draft them. And that's how Andrew Berry operated with Ford. All right, this is also kind of interesting. So Pro Football Focus released a little bit of the excerpts of a note that Roger Goodell wrote in reference to the Browns and tanking. And so Goodell said the Browns did not make any decisions to deliberately weaken the team. Also went in to say that, it was a significant multi-year rebuild based on where the team was relative to teams like the Ravens and the Steelers. Browns were trying to compete in that division. Bottom line is they didn't tank. It's just very interesting to take a look at what the commissioner had to say in reference to the investigation into tanking. Is that Hugh Jackson accused them of that. He later backed off those statements as well.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's one of those things that you can't really prove. Now, tanking means, in a traditional sense, in the only sense that they're going to enforce it in, is like you legitimately, like, blew games. Like, you know what I mean? Like 1918 Chicago Black Sox, like, tanking. Like, that's the only type of tanking that people are going to really, like, come down on in the NFL, because stinking is just stinking, right? And the Browns were especially stinky at that point, and they did things to stink, right? The Brock Osweiler thing, like, you can't tell me that was about winning, okay? But you got Nick Chubb out of it. Like, a lot of this was building towards the future, but that is not necessarily what the NFL is going to describe and letter by the law enforce as tanking. So this wasn't surprising. Like, the Browns would have had to be egregious, like the payouts that you would hear. Like, if they had actual proof of paying guys for losses, yeah, okay, you might have a point there. But nah, man, we started Deshaun Kaiser, dog. Like, I don't know what you like. What did you want us to do? You know what I mean? Like, look at the roster. They turned over 30 of the dudes from 2017 to 2018. And maybe you could point to that as a reason why they weren't trying to win. But it's not like they didn't keep the same coach while they were there. Like, it's just, man, incompetence is hard to differentiate from maliciousness at times, and that's just where that line is when it comes to tanking.
I gotcha. All right, Quincy Carrier and I are going to step aside, take one more time out, other side of the break. We look into some behind-the-scenes issues in the locker room with Baker Mayfield and Odell Beckham Jr. Sports4CLE. Be right back. Stay with us.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
We continue talking Browns with Quincy Carrier. Let's take a listen to this. Teddy Bruschi, former Patriots linebacker, on ESPN's First Take about the Baker Mayfield situation.
His plans of trying to play somewhere else and demanding a trade or whatever he demanded obviously failed. The draft has come and gone. They did not respond to his demands immediately, so there he is, still there. Remember the Cleveland Browns. I say he goes back into the locker room. Just go back in there. It is highly likely that Deshaun Watson will face some type of suspension, and that is where Baker Mayfield can go increase his value to a lot of other NFL teams by making the most of a bad situation and showing, number one, that he is healed from his offseason surgery, and number two, he can still play capable football. That would be the best for Baker Mayfield's future, and that's when you start to put on your independent contractor hat. I know this is not my team. I know they don't want me here, but I got something due for me in my career down the road, and that's where I feel Baker Mayfield can go ahead and benefit himself by going back to the Cleveland Browns and playing some football.
Quincy, I don't know that the Browns plan on playing him, but I certainly wouldn't release him if I was Andrew Berry. I think you will eventually get something for him.
I hope. I don't think they're getting anything for him. I think once teams decide they're gonna get Matt Corral over you, like that's a wrap. That's a wrap. Matt Corral wasn't even like a clean prospect. This wasn't like drafting Kenny Pickett or Desmond Ridder or Malik Willis, where it's like, okay, they're raw, but you could develop them. Matt Corral got off the field issues too, and they still decided they'd rather give up a 3rd-round pick to the New England Patriots to take a chance on Matt Corral over Baker Mayfield and whatever part of the salary you're going to take. We need to face the fact here in Cleveland, like, the Browns are willing to eat this money. It might be the same money, like it might be about $10 million they're willing to eat on this, which would make that money equivalent to Case Keenum. And they were able to give up Case Keenum for for a 7th-round pick. They can't do that right now with Baker Mayfield. They can't give him away at this point. And look, sometimes you want to give up, you got to sell something and you got to sell it undervalued. And it's not because you want to. It's just because it is what it is at that time. And I think it's about time we accept that this Baker Mayfield trade situation is what it is. He is not, like, people have not come out and supported him in that locker room. He would be nothing but an awkward presence in that locker room. And honestly, it could be a negative thing to the team that just have him there, knowing what's lingering, knowing that he could, bring some guys on his side against the coaching staff. Like, you don't want to bring somebody who could potentially be a malcontent into the building when it comes to somebody who knows they don't have a long-term future here, right? A lot of this keep Baker Mayfield on the roster stuff. To me, it feels like, hey, on paper, it makes sense. Logically, it makes sense. When you talk about it from a video game perspective, it absolutely makes sense. But to me personally, from a people perspective, if you got a dude that you can't have at work no more, he can't come up to work. Like, we have seen these situations play out in every workplace across America where a dude has to get replaced and he can't stay on with the transition team because he's not going to go out well. And you tell me, viewer, right here, look me dead in the eye, tell me you don't think Baker Mayfield the type of dude you got to make sure security come up to get his box of stuff because he might, try to do some extra stuff on his way out. You can't have him back in the building. If you thought you could have bring Odell back in the building and Odell wasn't doing all this, you definitely can't put Baker Mayfield back in this building. And they're making that clear because how many quarterbacks have they signed over the last 4 weeks? They've signed 3, plus Deshaun Watson, 4 of them. They have no plans on this man coming back in the building. Nobody wants to take him for free. He has no value at this point from a trade perspective. Like, either you could keep him there and decide you're going to punish him, which is going to be a bad look to a lot of players around the league if you keep him on roster, but don't use him all year. That's just a bad look, and it's very petty. Or you could just release him, wipe your hands of it, take the L. It is what it is. Look, my first car ran great. Then I hit a deer and it couldn't turn on anymore and I had to scrap it for $200. You know what I mean? I didn't want to do that, but I had no other option, right? I wasn't going to get a new transmission for that car. Same thing with Baker Mayfield. Look, hey, it worked great for a little while. Then it hit a deer and then
So
you got to sell it to the junk man for $200 because you can't pay for the tow. It is what it is at that point, and you just got to let that thing go. You don't want that car sitting in your driveway for a whole year because you can't find nobody to give you $300 for the car. Just let it go at this point, right?
So
what good are we gonna get like a 2025 7th round pick for him? It's a wrap, man. It's a wrap. They're just gonna have to let it go.
So Baker Mayfield, a 1999 Chevy Nova, kind of what you're telling me.
Hold on. Yeah, it was a 2007 Ford Focus SE. You know what I mean?
There you go.
Put some
Ford
respect on
Focus.
it.
All right. Let's take a look at this before we let you go. A couple of quotes from a story that Jake Trotter did about the whole Baker Mayfield situation and how it went down. As one source put it, the way Odell Beckham, exited Cleveland poisoned the well for Mayfield with some of his teammates. Also in that same article, the Browns began looking for a Mayfield replacement following the 15-10 loss to the Steelers, and that's when the offense looked just not good. They quickly began exploring 15-10 potential replacements. Very interesting, the timeline as well as, it seemed like something wasn't quite right all year, and we're starting to hear bits and pieces about what wasn't quite right.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense now, right? Remember we were wondering, did they give him a contract offer in that last offseason after he played well? And we weren't hearing anything back, and it makes sense now. They weren't really sold on him after that season for whatever reason. And this year, they took a chance, went out, gave him that fifth-year option, and then, he stunk it up, and they were like, okay, we might have to get rid of this dude, And then other things started to bubble up behind the scenes in that article. Players' trust in him really just went down the toilet. All those things. And then, look, in an NFL locker room, great athletes, filled with great athletes, they're going to value the other great, spectacular athletes, right? So just off proxy, based off of how talented Odell Beckham is, people have a ton of mutual respect for him, not just in the Browns locker room, but around the league in general. Like, he's one of the most well-respected dudes. He seems like he's a great teammate to have around. He's giving dudes shoes and all that. So, like, he has a great reputation. And once you feel like you've put once your quarterback has been in the position where he's been juxtaposed between a dude like that, and then he's Baker Mayfield, right? He's not Cam Newton, where Cam Newton's is like spectacular athlete too. People don't look at Baker Mayfield that same way, and you had to get rid of Odell for Baker. That's going to make people look at Baker like, okay, well, we got rid of Odell for you. How good are you going to be? And it didn't help that, he had the one good game against Cincinnati, but he fouled that up with giving up 45 points straight unanswered. Remember that one against the Patriots? Like, that was a horrible one too. Like, you can name them, right? The Patriots game, the Minnesota game, the Detroit game, both Pittsburgh games. These were disqualifying performances for a franchise quarterback, and they just kept mounting up on top of each other. And say what you want about the injuries, say what you want about all of these things. Aaron Rodgers has played injured before. I've never seen him look that bad. Drew Brees has played injured before. I've never seen him look that bad. Have you ever seen even a hobbled old Ben Roethlisberger had never looked that bad? Matter of fact, he beat Baker twice. Okay? So, like, franchise quarterbacks, they just don't, even if they're hurt, even if something's wrong, they're good enough mentally to be able to be serviceable at the end of the day. They might not be who they always were, but they can get away with certain things. Matt Ryan don't ever look that bad, right? But Baker Mayfield, he just ain't at that level. So when one thing's off with him, it goes. And that's not a good way to live at the quarterback position.
Quincy Carrier, great stuff as always. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Quincy.
No problem.
All right, Quincy Carrier, make sure you watch him, his YouTube podcast as well. Go Google it on YouTube, you'll find it. All right, we're going to step aside, take a quick time out. We continue talking Browns. Casey Kinnamon from Dog Pound Daily, straight ahead on Sports4CLE. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams, I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns. Let's welcome in Casey Kinnamon from Dog Pound Daily. Casey, last week when we talked on the show, you said you thought it was more likely the Browns would trade back than up. Did you think they were going to trade completely out of the second round when they traded back?
No way. I kind of saw it happening maybe 7 to 10 spots. And to trade all the way back to 68, like that was very puzzling to me. But they saw value. They saw value where they saw value. But also, when I thought they would trade back, I thought it was going to be because the player they wanted was already gone. When they traded back, they were looking at Sky Moore and George Pickett's, and they decided to pass on those in exchange for value later, which the stuff they got later, besides Martin Emerson, turns into Perrion Winfrey and Cade York. So, that's a pretty good 3-player swap.
Yeah, I mean, points to Andrew Berry. He seemed to understand how the board was going to fall. To do what he did and get the players that the players they took. We were talking about mock drafts to them and everything, and they got them later than we thought they would. This is really interesting. So you did an article for Dog Pound Daily that kind of gives pro comps for some of the picks. Let's run through a few of them. So Martin Emerson, you say Richard Sherman. Take us through the thought with that.
Well, on the face, it seems like a lofty, comparison. But keep in mind, when Richard Sherman came into the league, he was not a household name. He was a 5th-round pick. But you look at their length, Sherman's 6'3", Emerson's 6'2". They're both 200 pounds. Emerson's slightly faster, ran a 4.55. Sherman ran a 4.6. But they're both zone corners. And I think that's what's most important here. They both have some of the same deficiencies as well. When open field tackling appears, they'll go low as opposed to wrapping legs. And if they get beat off the line, they both get awful handsy. But in Sherman's case, he stayed handsy so much that eventually the refs just swallowed their whistles. So, I hope Emerson doesn't rely on that and he can refine his technique a little. And he's in a great room to do that. And I think he's in a very good place. But, my pro comparison for him was Richard Sherman.
So, Alex Wright, the edge rusher from UAB, you say Aldon Smith. Take us through that one, too.
Physical freaks. I mean, just look at the frames on those men. I mean, Wright is 6'5" and 271 pounds. And if you look at his frame, he's going to put another 5 to 10 on in the league. Now, after getting into an NFL strength and conditioning program, he is going to be an absolute monster. Very similar to Aldon in that respect. And they both win inside and outside. Tremendous first step. They can beat you right off the ball, but they can also do the dirty work on the inside. They also can come in a little hot and not really throttle down going into sacks. But if you think of what's on the other side with Miles, when Wright's coming in, I mean, that's just absolute chaos for a quarterback.
All right, David Bell, wide receiver that they took, you say Jarvis Landry. So fans will understand that comparison. They'll know what you're talking about. What do you see the similarities there?
You start with the frame and the athleticism. The frame, you're looking at Bell, he's 6 foot. Jarvis is 5'11". I think Bell's like 212 and Jarvis was like 205 entering the league. And they tremendous hands. I would say that Jarvis's hands are a full inch bigger than Bell's. But when you watch the tape, Bell doesn't drop any balls. I mean, he catches with his hands. They don't really win with speed, obviously. It's a lot of technique, a lot of precise route running. And they're both excellent at using their bodies to shield. And they're both sneaky good after the catch. If you miss, that first guy misses, they're going to rumble for another 20. You know, they're not easy to bring down in that respect. But I do think that Bell offers more natural outside ability than Jarvis. But just given what the Browns already have, he's going to win over the middle of the field, which is good for Deshaun because Deshaun owns the middle of the field. And I think that's going to be a good link for those two players. It just depends on how quickly they can get off the speed together.
Perrion Winfrey, a guy that the Browns got much later than anybody thought they would in the comp for him. Another guy that Browns fans will remember in Sheldon Richardson.
I think you start with they're both JUCO transfers. They both spent 2 years at a junior college, went to big programs, had tremendous success. Obviously, Richardson was taken much higher than Winfrey. But Winfrey fell. I thought Winfrey was going to be a late second at worst. For the Browns to get him a 108 is kind of silly, but yeah, similar athletic, both natural 3 techs in the NFL, and you know they have great motors. I will say this though, from a personality standpoint, I think Winfrey's comp should have been John Randall. After hearing his presser to the media, that man is electric, and I hope that energy rubs off on the entire room.
Yeah, he's a lot of fun. He will be a fan favorite if he can play like we think he can. All right, Cade York, the kicker from LSU, and you have Steven Gostowski. I hope you're right because they finally solved their kicker issue there.
Well, if you just look at their college metrics, they're very similar sized kickers, both fourth-round selections, very consistent. And if you look at, they both kicked over 96% from extra points, that's tremendous. And York's was even higher at 97.1, I believe, going 164 of 168 in college. I mean, and for a kicker, consistency is everything. And they both have absolute cannons attached to their hip. You know, the distance is not a problem. And I think it's funny, too, that it kind of seems like we're chasing what the Bengals did with Evan McPherson by going and getting a kicker who beat Evan McPherson with that 57-yarder.
Yeah, and the ironic thing is that it came out that the reports were that the Browns had McPherson slotted in as their 6th-round guy that they were looking at, and the Bengals beat him to him. That might explain why Andrew Berry is like, yeah, we're not missing out on the kicker we want here, and they took him in the 4th. Another article that you wrote that's really interesting, Browns redeemed themselves with the pick of Alex Wright. Take us through that, what you like about him, why you think this makes so much sense.
I just think they finally got the guy they can pair next to Miles. Now, that doesn't mean he's ready to do that right now, but he can grow into that role. And then you have 2 literal mutants on each end of the line of scrimmage. And that's what this team has needed for so long. They've been trying to replace, you know, and don't get me wrong, I still want them to get Jadeveon Clowney. That's priority number 1 for me right now. And then you allow Wright to grow into the role. But you got that other guy. And he can always look over at Miles and see what's he doing to get better. How, you know, you have the perfect template for what you're trying to build. And they've been looking for that. And it just kind of fell on their lap. And I know we were doing the mock draft last week, and Wright went at 99. I didn't think there was any way he'd make it to 99, and he did. Brown snagged him at 78, and I think it was a tremendous value where they got him.
Casey Kinnamon and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we'll look at some guys who have to step it up in training camp and OTAs to get back onto this roster. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns with Casey Kinnamon from Dog Pound Daily. So, Casey, you're a busy man. Another article that we're going to talk about that you wrote, 5 Browns whose jobs are in danger after the 2022 NFL Draft. Let's run through them real quick. So, Drew Forbes, Curtis Weaver, Jamarcus Bradley, Dearness Johnson, and Demetric Felton, Kareem Hunt. Take us through those and kind of what you're thinking through those.
Well, with Forbes, Weaver, and Bradley, it all kind of goes into the same pod as far as These are fringe players that the Browns have liked to keep around enough for 2 years and try to develop them. But the problem is that this draft is the Browns have raised the floor of the roster, which kind of, takes the old floor out, which was those guys. So I think that's how they fall. I think the most impactful part is the drafting of Jerome Ford and the ripples that it's going to cause in the running back room. And that brings us to Demetric Felton. They already went and got Jakeem Grant, so you got your return specialist. That's kind of where Felton was slotted to kind of make a difference as he came along. And then he's also a receiver and a running back. Well, last week they said, nope, we're scrapping that. He's only going to be a running back. To me, that just crushes that young man's value. And I think it's going to be a very uphill battle for him to make this roster. I would almost give it a 0% chance at this point if they're strictly only going to use him at running back. But then again, you look at Dearness Johnson and how much money he's making for a third string back. It becomes a math game at that point, and Jerome Ford would trump him as well. So you could get rid of both those players and substitute with Jerome Ford. Or the conversation that nobody wants to have is Kareem Hunt. Kareem Hunt is going into the last year of his deal. He's got tremendous value. He could get you a lot back if they were to trade him. I did feel hopeful that when he wasn't traded during the draft, they kind of told you that he's going to be here longer. But he's only a bad injury away from an NFC starting running back from the Browns getting an offer it's too good to refuse. And for me that'd be very sad because I need to see Kareem Hunt on the field with Deshaun Watson. I think he stands a ton to gain. Deshaun loves to work play side and then hit his check down quickly, as opposed to working backside to give his check down room to run. You do that with Kareem Hunt, he's going to go crazy. And I just think it would be a shame if he were to be off this roster, but it's a business. And then that's a matter of fact. It comes down to what you can bring in return, and Kareem Hunt could bring a lot in return, and he's going into the last year of his deal. So that's where I came down with him.
When I looked at what Andrew Berry did and the way they drafted, and I've said this a couple of times, it just seems to me like they draft like they expect. They're a contender and they expect to be one. There wasn't anything that was done immediate. It's all kind of on that 3 level, okay, we got to develop this guy because we're going to run into this situation a year or two down the line. Did you see that, or am I reading too much into it?
No, that's the Emerson pick summed up to me. Is who had Martin Emerson going to the Browns? Show me some receipts. Who had that? I didn't even study him because I didn't think there was a chance they would get a corner before their 5th or 6th round. But they value certain positional groups and they're looking ahead. Greedy is entering the last year of his deal, so they've already went and drafted his replacement, and he's going to get to come along while those guys are still here. And then of course Troy Hill was exited during that, and it kind of creates an open area for a slot, which I think will probably get occupied by Greg Newsome more than likely. But it's like you said, it's 3-dimensional chess. No one saw that move coming. I didn't. I was flabbergasted. But looking back in hindsight, they're doing exactly what you said. They're preparing for the future while getting better in the moment.
When you look at this roster, what area, and I think I know where this is going, but I'll ask the question, what do they need to upgrade? If I was going to say to you, Casey, you can have any 1 or 2 players that you need, who are you taking and why?
All right. Well, for the sake of this conversation, I'm going to say Jadeveon Clowney's already a Brown. Until he signs with someone else or retires, he's a Cleveland Brown to me. So for the sake of this conversation, I'm going to go defensive tackle. When you look at the defensive tackle room, those are a bunch of young bucks. The oldest guy's Sheldon Day at 27. A lot of them are 22, 21. They need more experience in that room. And I've been pounding the table for Akeem Hicks so much that it's getting silly. He's 32 years old, but I think he would provide a lot of leadership to that group. Or you might even look at someone like Linval Joseph, who's 33. I think that would bring a lot more maturity. And someone's going to have to kind of like keep Winfrey in check. He might just go over and take over the whole room as a 21-year-old.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Hicks or Joseph would be a huge addition. Casey Kinnamon, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much.
Not a problem. Love being on here.
All right, Casey Kinnamon, make sure you read him, Dog Pound Daily. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports4CLE. See you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Scheduled guest G. Bush from 92.3 The Fan, Sam Penix from Pro Football Focus and Dog Pound Daily. Tomorrow at 4 o'clock on Sports4CLE. We'll see you then. Have a great night, everybody.